From tragedy to return to God. About 30 years ago, Saturday morning, I was at home preparing my sermon for Saturday services, when suddenly there was a pounding knock on my door. I run to open up the door, and I see a deputy sheriff standing there, shaking and shivering and saying, "Rabbi, please, you must come. One of the parents from your preschool, their infant was found non-responsive. They're on the way to the hospital, and they asked you to come and accompany them to the hospital." I was terribly taken aback by this terrible news, and I told the sheriff deputy, "Absolutely, I will make my way over to the hospital." She says, "No, we want you to come now in the sheriff's car." And I explained to her that today was Saturday, and we don't drive in the cars on Saturday, but the hospital is not too far. It's about 1.5 miles away. I could walk it. I've done it many times. She says, "No, please come now in the car. I'll drive. I'll open the door for you." And I said, "I cannot do that. There's no need for me to violate the Shabbat because the paramedics are doing whatever they can do. And for me to do what I have to do, I need to be observant and I need to respect God's laws, and I will walk it." And I walked to the hospital, and by the time I got there, unfortunately, the infant has passed away from SIDS, and from sudden infant death syndrome. This was a horrible shock to the family, to our congregation, to our preschool. What happened after that was just a tremendous chain of events. Because the sibling came to our preschool, I got to know the parents. So I went over to the home to observe the Shiva services with them, to help them through this crisis. I held their hands, I embraced them, I hugged them. I brought groups of people over to the home so we could pray for 7 days straight. Let's fast forward 30 years later. 30 years later, I'm at synagogue, which is about 2-3 months ago. A woman shows up to services. And then after services, we have a luncheon, and she sits down at the lunch table, and I go over to her, and I introduce myself. I say, "Shalom, I'm Rabbi Goldstein. Who are you?" She says, "My name is Sharon, and I'm from Ramona." I says, "Welcome to our congregation. So nice to see you." She takes out a Jewish star, and she says, "You know, Judaism has been very close to my heart all these years, but I've been unaffiliated." As I begin talking to her, she looks at me. She says, "Rabbi, we know each other." And I look at her and I don't recognize her at all. She says, "Rabbi, I'll share with you. It's a tragic day of my life. That's how I remember you." She says, "You lived at that corner house?" I says, "Yep, that was me." She says, "Do you remember Saturday morning, someone pounding on your door?" I said, "Oh my God, yes, I do remember it." He says, "That was me. And I want you to know that event, arriving at the home as a sheriff deputy and seeing this 5-month-old child hanging between two worlds, left such an impression on me. I've never forgotten it, but I've also not forgotten the way you were so committed to your religion, how you are so committed to the religion that you wouldn't drive in my car. I actually insisted that you drive in my car, but you didn't. That left an equal impression on me. I watched you walk. I followed you until you got to the hospital, but you wouldn't take a ride from me. And that left an impression on me, how committed you are to God and to Judaism. Here we are 30 years later. I decided it's time for me to come home. It's time for me to get reconnected to God. And I look at her and I thought to myself, one never knows what actions they do, the ripple effect it can have. It may take days, weeks, months, years, or decades later. Never underestimate your doings. When Sharon walked into our synagogue, now she comes regular every Saturday services. She came the other day running with a recipe. She wants to cook chicken soup for the whole congregation. And I thought to myself, this infant who passed away at 5 months old, we have no idea why he had to live such a short time on this world. But one thing I do know is that from the tragedy, not only did his family come back home to Judaism and became very observant Jewish people, eventually they moved to the East Coast, but here is another individual who 30 years later has not forgotten that little infant and has been able to bring some hope out of this tragedy. And it taught me this incredible lesson. Never underestimate your commitment to God and your commitment to your religion, because you never know the effect that will happen down the road. I'm grateful for Sharon. I'm grateful for the day she came banging on my door, then, and 30 years later, walking through the doors of our temple. God bless you. God loves you.